Good morning. Call to order the January 12, 2010 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. At this point, I'd like to call on Pastor Steve Ponce, the youth pastor for the Central Assembly of God, to lead us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by William Collins, County Attorney. Please rise. Pastor, welcome.
Thank you. Let us pray. Our Father, we thank you for this opportunity to live and raise our families in this great county. We ask for continued wisdom and discernment for our leadership, and we ask for increased blessing and favor on all the residents and visitors of Indian River County. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It takes us to item 4, additions and deletions. I believe we need to pull item 5B. Mr. Millbrook will not be able to be here to make that presentation. And then hopefully all the commissioners got a copy of a letter I'd like to add as an emergency item under My Matters 14A regarding the eMindful job grant application that we approved. The state of Florida had a couple corrections in the resolution we passed, and so that'll come to us next week. But eMindful is ready to sign a lease and start hiring some folks here. So I'd like to bring this letter under emergency addition under My Matters.
What's the emergency?
Just the emergency is they are ready to sign a lease and to start hiring people. And this letter just says that it's going to preserve the inducement we've already awarded them. In the meantime, staff is working to make the corrections in the resolution and bring it back to us.
So move.
Second. Okay. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Commissioner Will, you motion cover all that?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Okay, that takes us to item 5, proclamations and presentations. A presentation by Susan Chenault on the Child Care Resources New Infant and Toddler Center. Susan, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your time on the agenda. I'm Susan Chenault. I'm here on behalf of Child Care Resources of Indian River County. Child Care Resources is a nonprofit agency founded on the belief that all children, regardless of their family's financial situation, deserve the best possible care and early education. Since 1994, this agency has made quality child care affordable for working parents in Indian River County by subsidizing tuition costs so that youngsters can attend high-quality, nationally accredited early education programs in the county. There are more than 1,000 at-risk children who've started kindergarten ready to learn and keep up with their peers thanks to the help of Child Care Resources, its programs, and its family enrichment opportunities. Commissioners, you're likely aware that the shortage of affordable quality infant care in Indian River County is critical. Working families of moderate means have been especially hard hit. Teen moms are trying to finish high school. We need to help them. In Indian River County, there are approximately 1,500 babies born each year. Half of them are born to mothers who are Medicaid qualified. And yet there are only 134 licensed infant and toddler spaces in Indian River County. So where do the rest of these children go? Working parents are often forced to choose among questionable programs due to the limited number of quality, affordably priced options. Private nurseries have prohibitive tuition costs, if they're available at all. The children in our counties are falling through the cracks, and you need to know this: they never catch up to their peers. School readiness begins in infancy. Current research in infant brain development indicates that infants placed in safe, stimulating, nurturing environments become hardwired for success in school and in life. But those who grow up with inadequate early stimulation and relationship-building opportunities show deficiencies in brain development that are never overcome as they age. Quality care infant and toddler programs are good for our whole county, because if a parent can safely place their child in a stimulating environment they can fulfill their responsibilities at work or in furthering their education while their child is learning. Workforce productivity increases, and meanwhile, every dollar invested in early education saves our taxpayers up to $13 in future costs for remedial education, criminal justice, prison, and welfare costs. $13 for each dollar invested. It's hard to turn down that. On quality child care matters, you already know from the 2006 needs assessment that was done in Indian River County that this is an area where we have a critical shortage. Among other things, the limited options are forcing people to put their children in unsafe situations, and it's time for somebody to do something about it. Child Care Resources is launching a campaign to open a Child Care Resource Education Center. Our target date is July 1st, 2010, and the facility is going to be located in leased space at Trinity Episcopal Church. This center is going to house 53 children. That's 53 new spaces in Indian River County for infants 8 weeks up to 4 years of age. 35 of those 53 slots are reserved especially for infants and toddlers. The Education Center is going to be open 12 months a year from 6:30 in the morning till 5:30 at night, and it's going to place our children in safe, nurturing, stimulating environment with developmentally appropriate curriculum. There's going to be a well-trained staff and space to foster growth and development. This is going to provide opportunity for 11 teachers to be hired as well as a center director. This program is going to be available for full-time working or student parents whose annual income exceeds the state and federal child care assistance levels, but who still have difficulty finding room in the family budget for quality child care and tuition costs. The pay is going to be on a sliding scale, so this is a hand-up, not a hand-out type program. We're asking today for the county to help us spread the word on this education center and its programs. We've undertaken a capital campaign. We want to raise $275,000 to cover the cost of initial equipment, teacher salaries, program costs, items like that. We know that these early education programs serve as an invaluable resource for all citizens of the county, again, because of the costs they save us over time and in the long term. All children deserve a strong start. Child Care Resources is helping Indian River County provide this, and we ask for your support, your prayers, your donations, and your communications. Please spread the word. This is a very important undertaking. We greatly appreciate your time and your assistance with this. And if anybody's interested in learning more, Child Care Resources has a website, but probably the easiest way is to call the center. Their number is 567-3202, and anybody there will be more than enthused to speak to you about the new education center. Thank you so much for your time.
And Susan, I think out in the lobby, you all have a poster with more information.
We do, yes, sir. Actually, what it is a photograph of two brains taken. One where an infant was exposed to stimulus, communication, education, music, a nurtured infant. The other child was not given the same type of early education, early support, and the brain development picture shows, it measures by heat, and so the color is what's really telling about it. And the brain of the infant who did not receive stimulation has a whole lot less color, a lot less brain activity is basically what it's showing. And a picture's worth 1,000 words, so if you get a chance to look at that, or anybody who's in the meeting today, it's out in the lobby.
Good. And I've also had the opportunity to tour the new facility there that you're working with Trinity, and it looks great. It's bright, it's colorful, it's clean. I think the kids that go in there will have a great opportunity. So what you all are doing is just wonderful for the community. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what, no, I haven't had a chance to tour the facility, but the CCCR and what they provide to that group, they seem to fall in between the cracks.
Absolutely.
Somehow they can't afford quality preschool, or they don't qualify for any assistance on the other end of it, and it's just the research is amazing as far as what we know now.
Right,
and what you're trying to make happen.
This is actually a chance for Indian River County to be on the cutting edge, because what we're hoping is that over time other child care facilities will come in and look at this center and see how it works and see the tools that we're using to give these children the ability to be learning ready when they hit kindergarten.
Great. Is there a website? I didn't hear a website, was there?
There is, and I will probably misstate it, so you're probably best off to call the center and ask
Yeah,
them.
just
It's
567-3202.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Anything? Susan, thank you very much,
Thank you.
and good
Really
luck with
appreciate
it.
your
And
time. Thanks so much.
all right, thank you. That takes us to item 6, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 17, 2009. We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second by Commissioner Flesher. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 7, informational items. There's one note there, no discussion on that. Takes us to item 8, the consent agenda. Gentlemen,
Move to approve.
Second.
we have a motion from Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Constitutional officers and government agencies, no items. That takes us to item number 10, public hearings. 10A1, board consideration to approve purchase of the Russell North property of the St. Sebastian River Greenway Connector, Land Acquisition Advisory Committee site under the County Environmental Lands Program. This is a memorandum dated January 4, 2010, and it is administrative. And welcome, Roland and Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. This is a proposed purchase of a property under the County Environmental Lands Program. We refer to it as the Russell North property of the St. Sebastian River Greenway. The property is part of the Greenway that was officially recognized by the Commission in 2006 per resolution. And the concept of the Greenway is for acquisition and establishment of public access along the St. Sebastian River for appreciation and protection of the river. In the slide on the overhead, the bottom right corner, there's the Ryle and Shadowwood parcels which the county has acquired for conservation. The yellow outlined properties are those that were targeted for acquisition. Subject property is 4.86 acres at the north end of the targeted properties, and it's adjacent to and north of just under 8 acres that was acquired by the Marine Resources Council with state funds for protection and conservation within the overall corridor. The map here on the overhead shows the overall conceptual greenway and the location of the subject property in context of that greenway. The property is accessed off of 86th Street or 86th Avenue north of County Road 510. It's once you get to the north end of 86th Avenue right away, the subject property is accessed by private access easements. The overhead also shows the context with relation to other developments. The subject property is actually within the city limits of Sebastian, has an RS10 zoning, which is single-family residential, approximately 4 lots per acre, and it's adjacent to Sebastian River Landings subdivision. The property is recently been formally split into 2 parcels. So these are 2 adjacent tax parcels, and it's next to the St. Sebastian River floodway. This slide shows it's a survey sketch, shows the property. Each of the 2 parcels is 2.43 acres, and there's an access easement on the west edge of the property. During the course of the review and consideration of this property, the wetlands were established through a coordination with the DEP on the part of the applicant, and the overall characteristics of the property are summarized here. It's 4.86 acres overall, approximately 1.4 acres of wetlands, 1.8 acres grove, and 1.66 acres of upland hammock adjacent to the Sebastian River. Now, this is an aerial that shows a good view of the property and approximate boundaries, showing the grove and wetland context. To the south, as you can just see the at the south end, the property you see just south of the property is part of the Marine Resource Council ownership. Just a few pictures. Again, there's the grove. It's currently managed as a grove as part of a bigger grove management to the south that's owned currently by the owner. There's a pretty good coastal hammock adjacent to the river. Right now, there's an entrance, controlled entrance to the private access easements by the Marine Resource Council as they manage their property. Again, this sign on the Marine Resource Council property, they had acquired the property with the Florida Communities Trust funding through the state, and they have certain obligations to manage the property. They have plans to open a visitor center and to do property management. They've already done some exotics removal. The Marine Resource Council is an important aspect of the property management, which I'll get into in just a moment. In the summary, again, 4.86 acres along the Greenway. The negotiated purchase price is $322,000, which translates to $66,255 per acre, which is 99% of the county's appraisal used to establish the county's value. The county's appraisal by Omfeld Wagner in June 2009 was for $325,000. Our normal cost share partner, or regular cost share partner through the county's environmental lands program is the Florida Communities Trust. This property, if that program was currently funded, this would be a pretty secure property for that funding cost share. It's adjacent to property that was previously funded by FCT. It's within a corridor. It's a good property for that program. Unfortunately, the funding circumstance for the Florida Communities Trust has not been established for the upcoming cycle of grants. However, they did announce that they are opening up the cycle in the event that they are able to get budgeted for funds. From a staff perspective, the bottom line is there are no current funds that can be counted upon through that program unless it is budgeted in the future. So we're proceeding in our view of this as there not being any current cost share funding. So if this is acquired, staff's perspective is this is a full purchase on the part of the county. That being said, if there is in some fashion funding available through FCT in the future, this would be a good project to apply for that funding. As I mentioned, the Marine Resource Council owns property immediately adjacent to this piece, which they did acquire for conservation, and they are managing it for conservation. The Marine Resource Council has been contacted by staff. They were at the Land Acquisition Advisories Committees, and they enthusiastically support this project and indicated that they'd be more than willing to manage the property as part of their property. We did suggest that on staff's recommendation is to ratify that proposal or concept of the Marine Resource Council managing the property through a long-term lease. And we think that is an important part of this purchase, and that we would have a presence essentially on the property to the south and essentially an agency that would be actively managing the property. This did go to the Land Acquisition Advisory Committee on December 9th, and the committee voted 13-1 to recommend that the commission proceed with the purchase. Kind of related to that, we had representation of the city, Sebastian, on that committee. We subsequently did get a letter from the city mayor with the city supporting the purchase. Staff's recommendation is that the board approve the option contract that had been entered into on this property and authorize staff to proceed and conduct due diligence, and if all is in order, that an authorization to close the purchase. if you have any questions. And I think we did invite, expect a member of the Marine Resource Council to be here. I'm not sure.
see Mr. Egan.
Otherwise, we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, any questions of staff? Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, just the only one I have is I see Mr. Rogers voted in opposition to this. He was the only one. Could you explain what it doesn't say in here what his reasoning was?
Essentially, there are two issues with Mr. Rogers, who was the lone dissenter on the purchase. I think one of the issues is Mr. Rogers, again, I'm just speaking from my recollection, is he is in the citrus management business, and he had concerns that a management concept expressed by the Marine Resource Council was to conserve the citrus grove and to manage it as kind of a example opportunity for people to see citrus in the county and maybe have a chance to harvest it the old-fashioned way. Mr. Rogers has concern that because of the size of the grove, which is small, it's under 2 acres, it would be difficult to manage that in any viable fashion, and it would be difficult to meet that objective. That was one of his objections. And I think in general, I think another concern expressed was we are down to on the funding from the county's bonds, we're down to roughly $650,000 or so, and this would take about half of that. And he was just a conservative view that should have more discretion in how we, in spending the money, maybe pursue conservation easements instead of this purchase. Staff perspective is because of the relationship to the adjacent property that it would be a reasonable purchase.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Story?
Roland, is it possible to get page 46 of the appraisal up on the MO?
Yes.
Are you looking for that? I'd like to say that I think that this is an extremely appropriate purchase, the right type of purchase. I think the Greenway is a great idea, but I have some hesitation because of the price, and that's why I'd like to get this page on there. In the appraisal, I only saw 3 comparables, and they weren't that close to the property physically. And one of the appraisals was 4.45 acres, which is close in size to the subject property of 4.86 acres. But the appraisal on the right-hand column under size adjustments increases the value of the subject parcel because of its size by 40%. And my guess is that's because the subject parcel was divided into 2 pieces, so it's supposedly more valuable. Is that why?
I'm just looking at this. I don't think, which one of these are inside the urban service area? 1, 2, or 3?
All of them are, aren't they?
I don't believe the 92, 91st. Well, I guess that is inside Bear Lake Estates, isn't it? Are all of them inside the urban service area?
I know that it looks like land sale 1 is...
Well, we can go back to that question, Commissioner, in a minute. I'd just like to address mine first, if I could. So on that right-hand column, it says under adjustments for size, 40%. The value of that property was increased 40% for some reason, correct? And initially when I looked at it, that size looked the same or similar to the subject parcel size. So I couldn't understand why the value would be increased by 40% because of size. And then I realized that the parcel was divided into 2, and my guess was that was why the price was increased by 40%. And if that was the case, then the other parcels, which are then half of the divided size, why weren't they reduced in value by about 20%? So when you get to the long and short of it, it seems to me that should have been certain adjustments made to this property in terms of price, which would have lowered the price. And the 2 adjustments are 1, size, based on the information on this page, and 2, time, because the appraisals for the parcels here were on May of 08, June of 08, and then the least valued parcel in February of 09. And this appraisal, I think, was maybe May of 09. And I think we're all aware the property values have decreased a significant amount in that time. So I would have expected to see some decrease in value for time. So, because of those reasons, it seems to me, based on this appraisal and the information in the appraisal, that actually the appraisal value is about 25% too high. Okay, those are my comments.
Okay. We don't have the Armfield here today. Okay. Commissioner Davis?
I just had the opportunity to walk the property with the seller's permission, and it's a very unique piece of property being located with some of it being located inside the city limits of Sebastian, actually going across the floodplain, being inside the urban service area. And then I think also, I talked to Mr. Rogers, also Commissioner Wheeler, and he did have an issue. He doubted the ability of or how much was actually buildable, and that's what I went in there to look at, to see just exactly how much of that would have been considered an upland enough, and I saw enough clearly for 2 residential home sites in there to be able to be built. But I talked with Mr. Rogers about that the other day. But it's a nice piece of property.
Okay. Commissioner Fleischer, any questions or comments to staff?
No, I do share the same concerns, but once again, I think it's a beautiful piece of property, and I believe that it brings great value to the citizens. How much of the greenway does this now complete, Roland?
Well, it's hard to say from a percentage standpoint. What I can say is that this does significantly, it adds to the pieces that have been acquired. We have roughly the 40 acres associated with the Ryle and Shadowbrook properties to the south. There's the MRC property, which is about 8 acres. This adds directly to that. Also along the property, some older pieces to the north. We've acquired the Anson property, the Fisher property, the Russell Grove or Cypress Bend, plus there's the buffer preserve. So this does add to that. I think there's still tasks ahead to connect those pieces, but again, we think one of the main values to this is the proximity to the MRC property and their willingness to be the full-time on-site managers.
Nonetheless, it's a significant addition to the project that moves it well forward. It's unfortunate that Mr. Egan is not here. His presentation about ownership and access and presence, and including the working grove that would greatly enhance this project. It's just unfortunate that he's not here to present that. It was quite impressive as the amount of commitment that the Marine Resource Council is willing to come forward with, which alleviates a lot of our management concerns about the property, and I believe that that has a significant value for the taxpayer as well.
Right. As I indicated, and staff indicated, we think that that is an important aspect, and we'd recommend that be part of the, we would need to ratify that management aspect. We would suggest that as we move towards closing, to make sure we have that ratified through a document that they would be the managers, and we'd have an opportunity to look at their management recommendations and approach to make sure they're consistent with the counties, and we'd recommend that process before the property is actually closed for purchase.
For additional discussion, have you looked at or forecasted the amount of cost that would be incurred if we as a county had to manage this property and to bring it up to the standards that Mr. Egan is suggesting?
Well, the property is such that, again, it would be, the benefit of having it next to MRC is that they've already established a public access point. If we were to manage this property independent from the MRCs, to meet our own objectives for these types of properties, we'd have to establish a public access point, parking facilities. We'd have to manage the property for exotics removal and native reestablishment. These are all costs we won't have to do. The MRC would take up otherwise. As far as actual costs, I really don't have an estimate of what the savings would be, but those are some of the things that we would no longer need to do under this approach.
Mr. Regan pointed out several species and some elements of the fauna that were present that would be maintained that were indicative of that area. Do you have any of that information, Roland?
Well, the coastal hammock next to the river itself, the wooded section, is a native bottomland forest. There's cypress, there's oaks. It's a pretty significant aesthetic coastal hammock on that location. The alternative to managing and keeping the citrus and trying to keep it as a demonstration citrus grove would be to, over the long term, restore it to a natural hammock. And that would be the alternative to that. So there is a good natural hammock buffer that exists on this property next to the river that would be maintained and eradicated of exotic peppers. But it is a good example of a coastal hammock adjacent to the river.
And again, in light of Mr. Egan's presentation there, would you be able to briefly discuss what he presented as far as a working citrus grove or a small operation that the youth and the citizens can partake and be involved with the citrus process?
Sure. What was expressed at the Land Acquisition Advisory Committee, which is again available on video for the public to access, but essentially his concept was that the Marine Resource Council property has an existing residence that's being converted into a visitor center. They have trails they're establishing on their own and would be established on this property. With respect to the citrus grove, what was discussed was to give it an opportunity for the general public to go to a grove, maybe harvest the citrus the old-fashioned way by using ladders, what have you, and have an opportunity to see and experience a Florida citrus grove in the harvesting aspect in a traditional fashion.
And Mr. Egan did state that he would be responsible for the management of that operation?
Yes.
And he intended on having it well bolstered with volunteers.
That's correct.
No cost to the county.
That's essentially what he said. And again, what we would look to is to have this ratified in a lease agreement that would explain all that the board could see prior to closing.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fleury.
Roland, did he give any figures on the cost of maintaining about 1.5 acres as a citrus grove?
No, he did not.
Okay, I was in citrus for 24 years, and citrus is not an easy business to be in, and citrus is not a native species, and it's very difficult to care for. And caring for a parcel of about 1.5 acres is an extremely difficult enterprise, and the idea of having people come in to pick citrus off of ladders for just the liability standpoint is more than questionable judgment on my mind. But just the cost of this, if they haven't shown where they're going to be paying to keep this up as a citrus grove, which would be some thousands of dollars a year, I think, on that size, especially with citrus greening around. Citrus growers now are spraying groves almost once a month right now for citrus greening. And the cost, I mean, this is a real feel-good idea that, practically speaking, is very, very difficult to work out. And I think that's the message that Mr. Rogers was trying to send. And again, I'll go back to the idea that this is a great piece of property along the Greenway, but the idea that an operable 1.5 acre grove is going to be a big plus, I think, is in the very, very difficult to manage category. And again, my concern goes to more back to the price of the property and how the appraisal was managed. But I would really think that this commission ought to take the idea, unless we have a lot of backup from the Marine Resources Council, of this being an operative citrus grove off the table.
Okay. Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I see in the minutes, and it just says that a lengthy discussion ensued on the appraisal, but that's the only mention of it. I'm just curious as to what some of the comments, pro and con, were about the appraisal at the Land Acquisition Committee meeting, because I agree with everything basically that's been said here. It's a great piece of property, it'd be great for the Greenway and so on and so forth, but I don't want to pay 2-year-ago prices for land's value today. I know people that were paying I guess as high as $258,000 for 5 acres. Now they're trying to sell them and can't get 100 out of them.
Good morning. I'm Bob Keating, County Community Development Director. This has been a long, involved process, and there have been at least 4 appraisals during this process. Initially, the county had 2 appraisals, and that's back when this property was one property. It hadn't been split, and the highest and best use was one house on that property. The owner also had an appraisal done in the general time frame that we had our 2 appraisals done, and that appraisal came in almost double what our appraisals came in. After there was a more detailed wetland survey, the 2 appraisals that we had were modified, and actually the appraised value went down. All during this time, it was unclear with the appraisers whether or not the 4.86 acre parcel could be divided into 2 parcels. And this is within the city of Sebastian. The city doesn't deal with lot splits and things like that to the extent that we do. So there was, I think, a lot of unknowns whether or not it could be split, because there's only an access easement that provides frontage to the property. Basically, after a while, the property owner was able to get concurrence from the city and actually physically split the property, which is when we had the Armfield appraisal done. And the Armfield appraisal came in higher than our previous 2 appraisals, because the highest and best use went from 1 house on 4.86 acres to 2 houses, 1 each on a 2.43 acre parcel. So you would expect the value to be considerably higher. Also, the graphic that we had up on the Elmo that showed the adjustments that were being made, I think actually illustrates the difficulty of appraising a property like this. There weren't any real good comps, and it gave extra credit for location because it's actually on the greenway. It actually abuts the river. There was a reduction in value related to the comps because of the access, because it's about a mile from the nearest paved road up an unpaved access easement. The bottom line has been a long, involved, difficult process. These are hard times to do appraisals generally, and this property, I think, makes it even more difficult to appraise. And the circumstances, particularly the lot split, changed the circumstances considerably during the process. We feel comfortable with the $325,000 appraised value now, and feel that the $322,000 proposed purchase price is an adequate price.
Okay. Any further questions of staff at this time? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If there's anyone that wishes to speak, please come forward. Good morning. Your name and address, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman, Joseph Paladin, President of Black Swan Consulting, and I represent the owners on this parcel. This is really a unique piece of property. I've been involved with this for a couple of years working on it, as far as marketing it and working with the owners. A lot of other people that are here worked on it a lot longer than me and have actually more background on it than I do. But I can tell you flat out that by going through all the appraisals, this has been a lengthy process. This has been a hard process to get to a point where we can make everybody happy. You got to realize we started out with an appraisal with the people that owned the property, Mr. and Mrs. Russell. They had an appraisal of $550,000, and that was done in September of '08. Clearly, that's not at the peak of our property boom. It was more or less on the downside of our property boom. So then when we maintained these other appraisals before the lot split, and before actually the delineation on wetlands was done, we came back and the county got a new appraisal from Armfield and Wagner. So that was $325. It still wasn't $550 or close to it, but realizing reality and realizing that these are owners that have lived here all their life. They're not flippers, they're not developers. They didn't buy the property to make a profit on it. They live here. So they really love the property, and it's no different than when we took the Gussie Rao property. And if we let this go into development after me saving that piece of property, I think she'd come back and haunt me. This is the best use for this property. I think we really need this for the Greenway, and we really believe in this. And I'd like to see y'all approve this today, and so we could go forward, because there's been plenty of negotiations and plenty of back and forth. I think that staff did a heck of a job to get this thing done. They worked together with me daily, and the owners have been very cooperative. And I think we're at a point where now we have everybody agreeing to something that we can all be proud of. So I'd like to let the public speak, and if there's anything I need to comment on after, I'd ask for a moment to come back.
Sure.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Johnson, please come up.
Bob Johnson, Corwin subdivision. Everybody, all the commissioners have asked very good questions this morning. But I think that we ought to table this based on the comments that the questions you've already asked the staff. Most important one is that Marine Resource Council does not have a written agreement between the county and themselves as to what the management plan will look like or what it entails. And since the county is buying this up for 100% out of our resources, it would seem like to me that it would be appropriate to have the management plan in front of you and be able to see what it entails and what the county's assuming responsibility for, and what supervision the county will have over Marine Resource Council as to supervising the management plan. I don't know how accurate the newspaper was, but it also said that in the purchase that there were going to be parking lots built on this conservation. Well, I don't think the bond issue that we all approved was for parking lots. I think it was for conservation land. So I think there's still some more research that the county needs to do. Maybe go back and get another appraisal. Look for a final management plan from Marine Resource Council and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this subject? Good morning, Dr. Cox. How are you?
Good morning, Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioners, David Cox, Periwinkle Drive, Summer Place. It's been a long road to get to this day in working on this particular property and in the Greenway as a whole, the St. Sebastian River Greenway. And staff's done a terrific job in moving this project along. It's taken quite a while. There's been a lot of changes in market circumstances and in the particulars of the property that have resulted in multiple appraisals. And I won't speak to that. What I will speak to is that the county's resolution to support the creation of a greenway along the river, I think, recognizes what is a globally important resource. There are very few streams that flow from inland Florida to the Atlantic Ocean. And the St. Sebastian River is one of a handful of, I think, about 5 or 6 of these streams. And it is unique among all of those in the fish species that occur there and in the wildlife that's supported in such an urbanizing environment. It's remarkable that we have a stream like that with the resources still surviving in such close proximity to a city that is growing. It will not continue to persist in its condition without active protection. And that was the idea behind the Greenway and the idea that Indian River County Commission has supported. And this particular little parcel, it's not a big one, is really crucial because it connects properties that the county has already purchased that are further upstream, with the larger protected lands downstream that the state has preserved in what is now State Park. And that stretch that runs through the curve there near 510 in the juncture of 512 is particularly precarious from the perspective of creating the greenway and the linking of the upstream and the downstream components. And without this parcel, it would be very difficult for us to really contemplate putting a trail in along the entire stream. And that's something that has been a big concern. I can appreciate that the long saga of the appraisals is somewhat confusing. And there were certain assumptions made initially about not having adequate access, not being in the city of Sebastian, not being able to split parcels, that proved not to be the case and resulted in revising and then calling for new appraisals. I think that the Russells are to be commended for having stayed the course and remained committed to trying to see this property go into conservation. They had other opportunities. They didn't threaten, but they really wanted this land in conservation. They care deeply about the river, and as we all do. And I would hope today that you can support this sort of dream of a connected greenway in the future. I think this is a good parcel and a good acquisition to make. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ruth.
Good morning. My name is Ruth Stanbridge. I live at 4835 66th Avenue. And I wonder if Roland can pop up on the screen the Greenway picture. I think that we need to look at the big picture that was committed to years ago and how we have continued to try to make that big picture happen. I know in real estate, location is very important, but in government, sometimes timing is what's important. In this case, the next piece of the big picture, you can see there, for the St. Sebastian Greenway is before you. Now location and timing have come together for this opportunity to acquire this piece. I was co-chair with Ted Moorhead of the Marine Resource Council when we purchased the piece just south of this in hopes that all these pieces would go together. I worked with the county when we did the Anson track where we have the little rails to trails, and I noticed just on your agenda you approved under the consent for a grant to make part of that segment happen. We already have a piece at the North County Park. So you can see this big picture is coming together. Now you have an opportunity to acquire the Russell property. This is the right thing to do for the environment, for our heritage, and for the next generation. This is a commitment that Indian River County made many, many years ago with their bond referendum, and we expect as citizens that this will continue to that big picture as part of reality. So vote for this acquisition. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Jim
Morning,
Tripson, 2525 14th Street, Vero Beach. I'm first vice president of Pelican Island Audubon Society. I would like to urge you to go ahead today with this and improve the purchase for the Greenway, but also really more importantly to protect the only river that we have in this county. I think fairly soon they would probably be able to sell it for considerably more money, and it'd be a real shame to see two McMansions there, because then they'd probably want to have docks on the river. It just seems to me it's a win-win situation for us to buy it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak on this? Mr. Paladin, did you want to do a follow-up?
Thank you, Commissioner. Very briefly. Also, if you'll look at that map, you'll realize that this piece of property acts as a great buffer between our river and the old KB home development that's still being built out, slowly, but still being built out. So this acts as a protection to protect our river. I think that this is an opportunity that's not going to come again, and I think we really need to stay on track and get this done as soon as possible. So thank you for your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Let the record show ample opportunity was provided to all to speak on this issue. Commissioners, your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Davis.
You know, I heard some concerns about the management plans and all that, and I really have to say that I feel a lot more comfortable with the Marine Resource Council managing this than I do the county. And a good example of that, quite frankly, is what I've seen with the Indian River Land Trust with the Shadowbrook Estates just south of Gussie Riles Peace. They are actively, I say they, the nonprofits that have volunteers engaged on a daily basis in making these management plans and habitat restoration projects come to fruition. To me, is a lot more aggressive, a lot more coordinated, and a lot more focused in getting these projects back to the state that they should be. And if you look at it just south of 510, the difference between the south side and the north side right there, it's night and day. I'd almost like to see us go to the land trust now and ask them if they'd like to take care of the Gussie Riles piece, and with the clearing and everything that they're doing of that, and removing the exotic vegetation, while the piece that we bought's growing up in peppers. And so, you know, the idea that we have somebody that is willing to take this on to manage this program, to me, is extremely important, and therefore I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Flesher for staff recommendation. Is there any further discussion? I'd just like to add, during the presentation of the Land Acquisition Advisory Committee, Mr. Egan's presentation was very impressive. I had, and how I look at this is there's four main criteria as why we should purchase this property. First and foremost is to acquire the land for conservation and for protection of the river and the buffer area. I think that's, you know, on a standalone, this parcel is probably worth purchasing just for that. Then when I wrap in the exotic removal and the maintenance of the vegetation, and then also that the Marine Resource Council was willing to help install trails and the maintenance of trails, visitor center, and the public access. To me, all of that wrapped in justifies the purchase price. I kind of share the same concerns as Commissioner Slaughter about the citrus operation, but to me that's way down on the list as what I'm looking for. It's the conservation and acquiring the land for protection, the exotic removal, and then the public access and trails and maintenance. And if they can do the citrus thing on top of all that, then that's kind of the gravy. But if they can do those first three, I think that's where I'm standing on this. And looking at all that, I did think that the $66,000 an acre was a little bit high given today's climate, but given the Marine Resource Council stepping in, to me that overcame that cost and made it a very reasonable package for the county taxpayers. And I have enough faith in Mr. Egan and Marine Resource Council that they will come to the table with us and work out a management plan going forward. You know, Mr. Egan was very adamant that his committee and organization was committed to working with us, and I'll take him on his word at that. So, is there any further discussion? Thank you. Okay, seeing none, we do have a motion for staff recommendation. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Nay. The motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Slaughter in opposition. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us now down to departmental matters, Public Works. Item 1, staff update on the Sector 3 beach renourishment project. Welcome, Mr. Mora.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Mora, Public Works Director for the county. I have an update, staff update on the beach restoration project known as Sector 3, which is in North County. This is a beach restoration project consisting just under 500,000 cubic yards of sand to be spread on 6.5 miles of beach. With the boundaries of the project are roughly between Treasure Shores Park and the north boundary of the town of Indian River Shores. As of yesterday, Monday, January 11th, we had not received our draft permit or the notice of intent to issue from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. This is a critical step for us. In fact, in order to begin the project, phase 1 of the project by February 1st, because of the public advertisement comment period, which is 14 days, and the need to hold a pre-construction conference, it was critical that we receive that notice of intent to issue and the draft permit by yesterday in order to keep in line with our February 1st start date. We pushed through a teleconference late yesterday. We pushed DEP to give us a timetable and when they would be able to complete their internal review, and they said it would be done no earlier than next Wednesday, which is January 20th. That is going to delay our February 1st start date. Basically, at this point, every day that we delay getting the permit adds another day onto the February 1st start date. Again, once we receive the draft permit and the notice of intent to issue, we have to do the 14-day public comment period. We have to hold that and advertise that. So if we move forward and look at when we would be able to start phase 1 of the project, if we were to receive the draft permit by next Wednesday, we're looking at about February 10th. Now, this is a slight setback for the project, but we don't think it's a deal killer. We have, if we start on February 10th, that would give us 55 days to complete the project if you don't include Saturdays, 65 days if you do include Saturdays. Ranger Construction has told us that they need approximately 47 days to do the work, so we've still got about a 8 to 18 day cushion in there to do the project, but we don't like being squeezed any more than we have to, because there's a possibility that there'll be bad weather days in which we'd have to curtail construction. So we still think it's a doable project very much, but we're really pushing DEP to get us that permit as quickly as possible.
Chris, did they give you any indication why they need an extra 8 or 9 days on this thing?
They have a lot of internal staff review on this with the sand processing and making sure that the turtle monitoring is going to go well. There's just a lot of eyes looking at this, and we've been coordinating constantly with Mike Barnett, who's the final sign-off on this project from DEP. And he's just indicated that they're working as fast as they can, but there's a lot of other projects that they're working on also, and they are giving priority to ours, but it's just going to take a little bit of time.
Well, I guess my concern is, one is that they've had the sand processing information for months now at this point. The normal turtle monitoring that we do for any beach renourishment project is standardized. The additional monitoring we're doing was at the request of the Fish and Wildlife Service for their Archie Carr area, and they've signed off on that. So, you know, I'm just not sure why they've come up with these excuses, but we'll let our legislators know that they need another kick.
It is frustrating, but there are some unique wrinkles in this project with the additional turtle monitoring test plan and the additional sand processing that has to be done. So we're frustrated as well, but we think that we can still do the project if they come through with the draft permit, notice of intent by the 20th.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Commissioner Davis.
You were thinking exactly along the same lines as me. Chris, and I've got to ask the question, it's obvious, but have we let our legislators know that we're being told it's going to be delayed by 10 days?
Not yet, but we're going to do that today. We just found out late yesterday and this morning what they were even unable to confirm any dates as of yesterday, but we pushed them and got a date of next Wednesday at the earliest that they'd be able to give us this. So we're going to go ahead and inform our legislators also.
Right, and that's not really a date. It's just no earlier than.
Exactly.
I mean, it could still be after that.
Exactly. And so, I mean,
concern.
we really need to, and I don't know whether the chairman needs to address that or how, but somebody needs to write a letter to our legislators and let them know there's a state agency that's not giving us our permit.
Right.
And
that will go out.
Thank you. Yes, sir. You can do that. And also, Chris, or Mr. Chairman, if I may continue.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Moore, the conversation that I had the other day with you, and I haven't had a chance to speak with anybody from Ranger, there's been some requests from the residents that live along 69th Street, North Winter Beach Road, regarding the use of Jake brakes. And I know at one time there were some signs up there that did say no Jake brakes, and I don't know whether or not we'll be able to do that in this project on 66th Avenue as the approach, as well as 82nd Avenue to the approach, really in some of those residential areas where most of the traffic is going to be focused. I see Mr. Smith out there, but I don't know if Steve, if there's any way we can get you a ranger to put up the sign. And we can't require that as a county ordinance, but as the contractor or the subcontractor, I believe y'all have the hammer to be able to make that happen for us.
Yes, sir. Steve Smith, owner of Range Road Lake, subcontractor to Range Construction. I'll personally order the no Jake brake signs, Mr. Davis, and just FYI, we're going to have a pre-con for our truck broker, and he's going to have all the truck drivers before the job even starts that are required to come in on their off day, or a week before, or 3 days before it starts, and everyone's going to sign a piece of paper to me stating that they will be cut from the job, no warnings if there's any speeding, trying to pass any people that live out there in the neighborhood, anything that's even gray area with the truckers, whether they get a ticket from any River Shores Police or not, we spot them. We're going to have our own people watching them as well. Anything at all, no warnings, they're gone.
Okay. Thank you.
But I'll get a sign up, because someone did knock that sign down.
Yeah.
Right. There used to be
one next to 66th, right, and then one next to 82nd.
Yep.
Yeah, there used to be, I think it was a homemade sign as you were going westbound on 69th Street, approaching the curve.
Yes, sir.
And
yeah,
I'll
order one, and I'll get one with proper, weatherproof posts and all that. So
thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Continuing on there, we are going to go ahead and schedule the pre-construction conference with the county, the engineer, ranger, and any regulatory agency staff that are required under the permit. The pre-construction conference has to be held after the 14-day public comment period is ended, but prior to receiving the notice to proceed from DEP. It's actually a requirement of the notice to proceed. We're going to try and set that up so that it happens as close to the end of the 14-day comment period as we can, so that we don't delay anything. As far as the erosion control line goes, the final step in that process is occurring this week, as the state will be recording the resolution establishing the erosion control line. I don't know if the board remembers, but the erosion control line is actually the new boundary between public and private property. Seaward of that line is private or public or state property. Landward is private property. That'll be wrapped up this week. We're also working with Ranger Construction on the contract for this project, which we'll be bringing to the board at the next meeting on the 19th. They have requested a change order, and we're working out the cost details and justifications on that change order. Basically, there's three things that are causing this change order. One of them is the main one. It's about a $500,000 item, is the sand processing. Because the agencies have required that this inland or upland sand be beach compatible sand in color and grain size, they're requiring the contractor to do much more processing of this sand, washing away the finer material and so forth. That adds to their costs. Also, there's additional testing requirements. They're going to be required to test the sand much more frequently than in our other beach restoration projects, because, again, of the upland sand sources. And also the phasing of the project, because it's being spread over 2 years, phase 1 this year, phase 2 next year, there's additional mobilization, demobilization charges. Coastal Tech, our coastal consultant, is looking over all these costs, and we expect to bring that change order to the board at the same time we bring the original contract, which will be next Tuesday. We're also preparing an additional work order with Coastal Tech to perform the CEI, or construction inspection services, on this project. This will be for monitoring the Sector 3 project, and we're going to bring that to the board next Tuesday also. And that finishes the update.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Chris? Will?
Chris, the fact that they're not issuing or giving a notice of intent to issue the permit until the 20th, I've always understood our position to be we've given a notice of our intent to award as soon as DEP issues the permit. If they're not going to issue the permit until the 20th, can we bring a contract on the 19th, or are we going to be at risk that we enter into the contract and the permit isn't forthcoming?
Well, we had talked about that, and I think we looked at it as perhaps bringing the contract early wasn't so bad as if we conditioned the contract on receiving the final permit from DEP. If there's some language we could add that would allow us to enter into the contract but condition the finalizing of it or execution of it until we actually receive the final permit, that may be the way to go.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. Appreciate the update. Thank you. Takes us to item 12J, utility services. Item 1, work order number 19, professional services to Kimley Horn and Associates for demonstration of 4-log virus treatment of groundwater rule at North and South RO water treatment plants. Memorandum dated December 16, 2009. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Slurry, second by Commissioner Davis for staff recommendation. Any discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, if Eric would explain to me what the identifying the log virus credits for each of the existing treatment components, I assume, well, just explain the whole thing to me.
Sure. For the record, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. Based on the design of a water plant, there's a calculation, what they call CT, which is really contact time based on the amount of disinfection versus a period of time that and it gives you an assurance that there's a disinfection process that takes place. What we need to be able to demonstrate is based on our plant designs, which we believe we'll easily be able to do, is that the amount of contact for the disinfection will give us a 99.99% certainty that there will be no viruses or bacteriological contamination. Every water plant in the United States has to accommodate this. Those that don't have that ability to demonstrate 99.99% disinfection capability have to do additional monitoring in perpetuity. So we feel like we've got to go through the process. It saves us on the long run, and it actually gives us a little bit of a customer assurance that, yes, we're one step ahead of what the process might be.
But what are the identifying log virus credits? What credits to me says you're getting something? I mean,
all that the credit sort of implies that you're actually getting something. All that tells you is that you have the ability to demonstrate that your plant has the ability to demonstrate disinfection that other plants perhaps may not be able to do. So if you're getting a credit, you're getting the credit for not having to do additional monitoring at a later date for bacteriological and virus types of contamination. So it's not really a credit that you're going to get dollars or something other than just an acknowledgement that you won't have to do additional sampling.
Okay, I was just concerned that maybe this was something like the carbon credits where we have something that doesn't exist that we sell, and we could clean our water up and somebody else could buy the credits and have dirty water.
No, this is a little bit more basic than that. It just basically is an insurance credit is really what it amounts to.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? We do have a motion and a second, so we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Item 2, settlement of utility fees for utility connection fees for Emmanuel Baptist Church. Memorandum dated January 5, 2010.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Eric. Takes us to 13, County Attorney Matters. A, Devasta Waterway Village Litigation Update. I believe everybody should have gotten some backup this morning on the dais or at their office. Will?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
I will too. Or second it.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Davis for staff recommendation, and I'll read that into the record. Staff recommends approve some level of budget amendment to avoid having to switch legal horses, not in the middle of the stream, but as we are approaching the far shore. Will, do you have a recommended budget amount, or?
Well, when this matter was before the board last week with a group of other budget amendments, I had recommended, Mr. Brown, the budget director, had asked me for an estimate of what it might take to close out. And I just thought that there may be 3 more months, and if there was intense involvement of the Shubin firm, it could be $3,000 a month. We have a couple of other cases that are within days of hopefully being disposed of, and there might be $1,000 there. That's how I came up with the $11,000 estimate. That may be too high, it may be too low. One of the things that I try to explain in my memo is there'll be a heavy level of staff involvement in processing the settlement through the DRI amendment process, but there's also a stipulated settlement agreement that needs to be filed with a court that memorializes what those amendments end up being. I think my estimate is probably on the high side, and I talked with Mr. Shubin, and he's sympathetic to the board's position to keep the costs down, and I think will probably involve himself only when there is some legal need, rather than getting involved in each step of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the coordination with Treasure Coast, and the hearing process here. So I'm hoping that my estimate of $11,000 is on the high side, but it's just no way to tell. I actually expected that this settlement would have been concluded by now, but Devasta, rather than filing their proposed changes in August, is just proposing to submit them this week, which is a substantial delay that we couldn't really control. So, I can't guarantee you anything. 11,000 is my estimate. It may be high.
All right, Commissioner Wheeler, did you want to move forward with the 11,000, maybe with instructions from the attorney not to exceed that without board approval or anything along those lines?
Well, I don't know that he could exceed that without the approval if we approve that, and that would be fine with me. But the one message I don't want to send, because this isn't settled, is that we're getting gun shy because of costs when we're looking at over $6 million judgment. So I'm committed to moving through with this. So I don't, the 11,000 is fine. If they need to come back, that'd be fine too.
Okay, so I think we need to give Jason a dollar amount if he's going to make it a budget amendment. So,
are you happy with 11,000, Will?
I think that's the best we can do right now. If it needs to change, it will, but I'm hoping it will come in under that.
Okay. And Commissioner Davis, are you okay with the 11,000? All right. We have a motion and a second for staff recommendation for a budget amendment of 11,000. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I'll just add, in your comment, Chairman, you mentioned that in Will's memo we talked about switching horses in midstream. I just, going through the backup and all, it just looks like the taxpayers have paid $76,000 for conversations with the attorney which weren't really needed. And all, to me, that's shown is that the stream has, since the start, been only a few inches deep, and we really had no need for a horse to start with to cross that stream. So that's the basic reasoning with what I articulated last week for why I'll be voting no.
Okay.
And that's a non-practicing attorney's opinion?
Yes.
It's been more than just conversations with the attorney. There have been lawsuits for Harris claims. There's been discovery. They've done a lot of work for us.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign.
Nay.
Okay, the motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Solari dissenting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Takes us to Commission Matters 14A. Hopefully everybody got a copy of this letter.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll second that. We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second by myself. Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposes, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. And that hopefully will help get them going and opened up and hiring people and putting people to work.
Excellent.
Thank you. Commissioner Commissioner items B, Commissioner Bob Slurry, Economic Development Summit, memorandum dated January 5, 2010. Commissioner Slurry.
Thank you. I just would like to remind everybody that the county is going to have an economic development summit on February 18th, and I'd hope at this point that everybody who might attend would put it on their calendar. I'd like to thank Sebastian for hosting this event, and we'll say that this event will be somewhat similar to last year's in that in the morning we'll be talking about economic development, and there will be a time for public comment towards the end of it. That portion will go from 9 to 12 in the afternoon, which will be led by Chairman O'Brien. We'll be talking about goals and strategic vision for the county. Certainly hope that everybody can come, and if they have any comments or suggestions prior to that, they can please just give me a call at the county at 226-1438. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further addition on that? Thank you, Commissioner Slurry, for organizing that. We're looking forward to that. 14C, Commissioner Wesley Davis, request for discussion, memorandum dated January 6, 2010. Commissioner Davis.
Yes, Commissioners, I had the opportunity to have Mr. Smith, Mark Smith, call me. He lives in the the manufactured home down at the South County Park. He's getting ready to retire after 30 years with the Sheriff's Department and would like to sell his unit that he's in. Unfortunately, in today's real estate market, he's having trouble doing so, and with him not being an active member of the Sheriff's Department, he will not have a patrol car. That poses a little bit of a problem to the lease there. This isn't something that he's looking at for long term, just enough time to where he can be able to find a deputy to be able to, or somebody that meets the requirements that the county's put in place. I didn't want to move forward with the staff time on this if there wasn't something that the commission would not be, I guess, favorably looking at. So therefore, I'm kind of asking for your permission to have the staff work something out with him. The only thing he's not going to be able to do is have a marked vehicle. He's going to stay as a reserve, and therefore he still will have arrest authority. And again, he just needs enough time to be able to market the property.
Okay, and do you have a recommended time? Basically, I guess you're asking for a waiver of some of the lease agreements until such time as he can arrange for.
I'm not ready to hammer anything out here. I just like to direct staff to work something else so that we have an employee that's been with us for 30 years be able to deal with the economic times that we're talking about, and something that they feel comfortable with, come back with us. I just didn't want to direct them without y'all's approval.
Okay.
Well, the lease itself requires the tenant to have an assigned marked patrol car unless that requirement's waived in writing by the Board of County Commissioners. There's also a provision that modification be done in writing. We could bring back a modification to the lease waiving that requirement for a marked patrol car, but you have to find that it's in the best interest of the county to do so. And what I'm hearing is you may be willing to do it for some short period of time, but I'm not sure what that might be.
I agree with you, and I didn't want to get in the middle of negotiating a lease. He called me; it made sense, and I think it's something we could do short term without.
Well, I guess the staff will need to have some discussion with him about timeframes, and then could bring back a lease modification to that effect.
That would be fine with me. But in fact, I'll so move that.
All right, so that's a motion to have staff speak with Deputy Smith to determine his time frame, and then also to consider waiver of item 7.1 of the lease agreement. Is that correct, Will?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Not the whole item, though, just the marked car part.
Right.
Right. Yeah, that's 7.1 deals with the marked car.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it deals with other things too. So.
Well, just just that. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I'm not
I understand
trying
that. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think the important thing is that he, while he's there, he maintains his reserve deputy status, so his power of arrest.
He does.
Okay. Is that a second, Commissioner Wheeler? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to item 15B, Special Districts and Boards, the Solid Waste Disposal District. Work order number 13 to Camp Dresser and McKee, Inc. for engineering services with the 2010 Annual Compliance Monitoring and Reporting Memorandum dated January 5, 2010. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Slurry, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Item 5B2, work order number 14 to Camp Dresser and McKee, Inc. for engineering services with the 2010 annual financial reports, memorandum dated January 5, 2010.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fleury, second from Commissioner Fleischer. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Gentlemen, is there anything further for today's meeting? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.